Solo Leveling by Chu Gong. Chapter 8 Part 1 The Demon's Castle. Jin Woo stood outside Daesung Tower. It was a giant building with more than 100 floors that looked like it was going to poke the sky. Skyscraper was a very apt name for it. Jin Woo felt dizzy just looking up at it. Since it was night, not many people were walking by. The empty streets had a creepy vibe to them. Still, just in case, Jin Woo looked around and then pulled his hood forward. A person disappearing and reappearing without the presence of a gate was sure to cause a disturbance. Plus, it wasn't a bad idea to be cautious, since there were surveillance cameras everywhere. In fact, someone was actually watching Jin Woo at that very moment. Who the hell is that? A person circling the building with their hood up at this time of night was definitely suspicious. The security guard watching Jin Woo from inside the building stood up to confront him. As the guard headed for the door, he suddenly stopped, and his eyes bulged out. "WH what?" Shocked, he ran out of the building. The man who'd been walking in his direction had disappeared in the blink of an eye. There wasn't a trace of him. The security guard searched everywhere, but couldn't find a single other living creature, not even an ant. He turned around and shook his head. Huh? How strange. He was about to head back inside the building, but seeing something out of the corner of his eye, he turned his head. Ack! The horrified security guard fell to the floor. WH, what is that? His face grew pale as he screamed. A single human hand floated in midair in front of him before vanishing. Jin Woo withdrew his hand. It's connected to the outside. This place wasn't blocked by the barrier like the last time. The key hadn't disappeared and was still in his pocket. That meant he could leave anytime he wanted. I have a way out of here. He was more cautious than usual in case the acquisition difficulty of the key indicated the level of the dungeon. He took off his hood and looked back. What he saw almost made him groan aloud. When Jin Woo walked a few steps toward where Daesung Tower should have been, the world in front of him changed completely. Could this be called a dungeon? He was in a totally different world now. Where once had stood Daesung Tower was now an incredibly huge spire. It looks more like a medieval tower than a castle. The tower that stretched out endlessly toward the sky was covered in blackish red fire. But it wasn't on fire. It looked more like the flames were part of the structure. A towering tower of fire. That would be a more apt name than the Demon's Castle. Jin Woo started walking toward it. Whoosh! As he got closer, the sound of the flickering flames grew louder. Can I go inside? Even if he could, there was a problem. If this dungeon was based on the layout of Daesung Tower just as the last dungeon had been based on the layout of the subway station, he would have to clear 100 levels to complete it. He couldn't begin to guess how long that would take. Huh? Jin Woo stopped. He sensed a powerful presence near the door. He examined the area carefully and spotted a black animal as big as a cow curled up and sleeping in a corner near the door. He quietly summoned Kasaka's Venom Fawn. Ping. Item: Kasaka's Venom Fawn. Acquisition difficulty: C. Category: Dagger. Attack power plus 25. A dagger made from a Kasaka's Venom Fawn. It contains Kasaka venom and causes paralysis and drain debuffs when used to attack. You may keep it in your inventory or sell it in the shop. Debuff: Paralysis. Opponent cannot move for a set time. Debuff: Drain. Opponent's HP will decrease by 1% every second for a set time. Its attack power wasn't very high, but the debuffs had proven invaluable in actual battles. It'd be great if I could easily defeat it with paralysis. Jin Woo slowly tiptoed as quietly as he could toward the creature. He couldn't evade the monster's sense of smell, though. It sniffed the air and got to its feet. TSK. Jinwoo clicked his tongue. The creature's 3 heads swiveled toward Jinwoo. Hell's gatekeeper Cerberus, a huge dog with 3 heads. Jinwoo noted that the creature's name was written in red letters. It was proof the monster's level was high. Is this monster the same level as the centipedes from the penalty zone, since its name is in red? He'd been preoccupied with running away from the centipedes back then. He'd only been level 1. But I'm different now. He'd leveled up quickly in a short period of time. The monster was definitely strong, but he didn't feel intimidated. His keen senses told him that he could take it. He hadn't increased his perception stat for nothing. He'd continuously invested points in it, so he'd be able to determine whether he should fight enemies or run away. Growl. Cerberus started threatening its perceived antagonist by gnashing its teeth. Jinwoo sneaked a peek at the monster's tail. It was long like a whip and had a fiery tip. Jinwoo's eyes gleamed. Teeth and a tail. This one has at least 2 attack patterns. He swallowed nervously. The approaching Cerberus stopped short and seemed to examine Jinwoo. Is it looking for my weak spot? As Jinwoo was wondering about it, Cerberus rushed at him. RRRFFF. Jinwoo looked rattled. It's fast. Cerberus jumped at Jinwoo, but he escaped the dog's sharp teeth by quickly sliding under it. Cerberus turned as soon as it landed, and its 3 mouths went after him. Roar! Roar! Its sharp teeth gleamed at its mouths. Ping! The buff for title, Wolf Assassin, has now been activated. Title, Wolf Assassin. A title given to those skilled at hunting wolves. When battling an animal-type monster, all abilities will increase by 40%. Jinwoo felt his body get lighter. Great. He kept retreating while swinging the dagger as Cerberus attempted to knock him down. SHWP, SHWP Schwab, SHWP. Clang. See clang. Clang. The sound of the dagger and teeth striking echoed loudly. The dagger was moving so fast, it was hard to see, but Jinwoo could barely block Cerberus's attacks. Even with the buff, this is all I can do. The monster was a lot more agile than Jinwoo had expected. He used the murderous intent skill in the hopes of turning the tide. Skill, Murderous Intent, has been activated. The debuff has been cancelled out by the opponent's high resistance level. Jinwoo was startled. It didn't work? Cerberus's long tail cracked down like a whip. Chalk! Jinwoo escaped the attack by ducking instinctively, but this meant his feet had stopped moving. Cerberus took advantage of this opening. One of its heads bit down on Jinwoo's left shoulder. Arg! He stuck the dagger between the creature's eyes with all his might. SHHHK. Debuff. Paralysis has been activated. The debuff has been cancelled out by the opponent's high resistance level. Debuff. Drain has been activated. The debuff has been cancelled out by the opponent's high resistance level. Yip! Cerberus yelped as it released Jinwoo. Luckily, he was able to escape before the other heads joined in, minimizing the damage. However, his left shoulder was all torn up. Cerberus's bite was incredibly strong. Jinwoo tried to flex his left arm, but couldn't move it. He grimaced. He'd dealt a bit of damage to his opponent, but the damage he'd sustained was much worse by comparison. If paralysis and drain had worked, things would be different. Jinwoo gritted his teeth as he glared at Cerberus. At that moment, huh? Cerberus's eyes started glowing red. GRRR. Jinwoo felt a sudden chill. What is this? Hell's gatekeeper Cerberus has used skill, Rage. It will be in a state of rage for 3 minutes. All of Cerberus's abilities will be increased by 2 times. Cerberus will not feel pain. Jinwoo cried out. What? A monster could use a skill? Cerberus came charging at Jinwoo. Shit! Cerberus was in front of him before he could react. Jinwoo hastily swung the dagger, but could only graze its head. All 3 of its mouths went after him simultaneously. Chomp! Ah! Jinwoo gritted his teeth as Cerberus bit down on his neck, side, and thigh all at once. It dashed and slammed Jinwoo against the castle's door. Wham! Jinwoo's HP dropped almost to nothing in an instant. R. HP 411/3 602. Ping. Skill. Willpower has been activated as your HP is below 30%. Your damage will decrease by 50%. Luckily, Jinwoo avoided an insta-kill due to the decrease of physical damage and the passive willpower skill. GKKK. He endured the pain coursing through his body because he knew he had only one chance. If he lost focus, it'd be over. 178, 179, 180. Jinwoo had been waiting for the 3 minutes of Cerberus's skill to expire. He finally played his last card. Accept Reward 1. He accepted Reward 1, which he'd saved instead of accepting right after the daily quest. Reward 1. Full recovery applied. Shwa. His body was engulfed in blue light, and his HP recovered. HP 3602/3 602. His wounded shoulder immediately healed. It's now or never. Jinwoo's eyes flashed. No matter how agile his opponent was, it wouldn't be able to avoid attacks at this distance. Jinwoo wrapped his left arm around Cerberus's neck and stabbed Kasaka's venom fang straight into the middle of its throat. SHHHK. 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 Its rage state appeared to have expired, and it started struggling to escape. Jinwoo's hold. Yip. Yip yip. 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 But Jinwoo held it in a death grip. He tightened his hold the more Cerberus struggled. He stabbed the neck countless times. SHHHK. 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 Yip yip. HNN. HNNNN. In a last-ditch effort, Cerberus bit Jinwoo, but the victor had already been decided. SHHHK. SHHHK. Yip. Yip. Kasaka's venom fang cut into Cerberus's neck and sliced down to its chest. SHHHK. 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 Cerberus stopped flailing as much. HNN. Finally, its head dropped to the side. Ping. You have defeated Hell's gatekeeper Cerberus. You have leveled up. You have leveled up. You have leveled up. You have leveled up. Jinwoo's level went up by 4 all at once. The battle had been that difficult. Jinwoo let go of Cerberus's neck only after seeing its body go limp. The creature's lifeless form dropped to the ground. Whump! Jinwoo put his hands on his knees. Phew! He exhaled a big sigh of relief. A monster that could use a skill. If he hadn't had his secret weapon, there was no doubt he would have been killed. He got chills just thinking about it. Oh, right. Items. Would they be worth all the effort Jinwoo had gone through? After catching his breath, Jinwoo extended his hand to Cerberus. Ping. You have discovered item, Warden's Collar. Would you like to acquire it? You have discovered item, Castle Door Key. Would you like to acquire it? You have discovered item, Cerberus's Fangs. Would you like to acquire it? Acquire all. The steel collar that was around Cerberus's neck, a gray key, and 3 fangs appeared on the ground. Item: Warden's Collar. Acquisition difficulty: A. Category: Collar. Agility plus 20, Perception plus 20. Item: Castle Door Key. Acquisition difficulty: A. Category: Key. This key unlocks the door to the demon's castle. You can acquire this only when you kill the gatekeeper. Item: Cerberus's Fangs. Acquisition difficulty: None. Category: Miscellaneous. Oh! Jinwoo's eyes lit up. The collar will increase the stats of agility and perception by 20 points. The collar was an amazing item. The acquisition difficulty was a rank. That was the highest level among all the items he'd acquired thus far. Well, killing the dog wasn't easy, so there was no way it would be a low acquisition difficulty. But Jinwoo hesitated to put on the collar. It was a dog collar consisting of a metal band with spikes on it. He closed his eyes and debated whether to wear it, before deciding he should at least try it on. As he held it up to his neck to put it on, a message popped up. Ping. Would you like to put on item? Warden's Collar? After pondering it some more, Jinwoo responded rather unenthusiastically. Sure. The choker slowly vanished. You have put on item, Warden's Collar. Huh? Jinwoo quickly called up the stats screen. Stats: Strength 60, Stamina 39, Agility 80, Intelligence 37, Perception 67, Available ability points 0, Physical damage reduced by 20%. Whoa! Agility and perception had actually gone up by 20 points. The boost had been applied immediately. It looked like the item wasn't visible when it was worn. Jinwoo was relieved he didn't have to walk around with a dog collar around his neck. Next, the fangs. Jinwoo pulled up the shop. Cerberus's fangs, which were miscellaneous items, sold for 15,000 gold each. He had 3 fangs, so he'd made 45,000 gold. Balance: 562,362 gold. Why is this miscellaneous item worth so much? It was a good way to estimate the difficulty level of the dungeon. This meant that the level of the demon's castle was just that high. However, that wasn't particularly bad news for him. He'd made 4 times more money from killing one monster here versus the instance dungeon at Hapjeong Station, where he grinded all day. If he kept saving gold at this rate, it wouldn't be long before he could purchase some of the more expensive items in the shop. If I can clear this dungeon. Jinwoo looked up at the flaming tower. Phew. The top part was covered in fog. He wouldn't know what was inside until he actually went in. He shook his head. Not yet. He'd barely defeated the gatekeeper using a quest reward coupled with the buff from his title. He couldn't even guess what dangers awaited him behind the door. He would withdraw for today. Still, one thing was for sure. As the description said, the castle door key was definitely what he wanted. It truly was a blessed mystery box. Leveling up, items, and gold. This place provided everything he could hope for. When the time was right, he would acquire them all. But that time wasn't today. He was a little disappointed, but he put the great key into his inventory. I'll be back. He'd be back soon for sure. Jinwoo walked away with a smile on his face. A few days passed quietly. Jinho called Jinwoo once a day to report his progress. He'd called exactly 3 times since their last meeting. Boss! It's me, Jinho. Get to the point. Yes, sir. It looked like Jinho had been able to recruit people with no problem. He kept asking Jinwoo to wait just a little longer because the squad was almost ready. I guess he's worried I might ditch him. But Jinwoo couldn't just wait around and do nothing, so he visited the hunter's website today as well. He kept searching for strike squads, but none wanted an E-rank hunter. He'd gotten lucky on that first day. Dong-suk's ulterior motive aside, he'd enabled Jinwoo to join a strike squad for the first time. Because of what he did, I was able to make money, level up, and obtain a new skill. Should Jinwoo be thankful to him? Jinwoo snickered. At this point, he didn't care if he came across more lizard-esque scam hunters. He couldn't find a freelance job, the association wasn't calling him, and there were no more instance dungeon keys. All he was doing now was passing the time. Grumble. Is it already time to eat? Jinwoo stopped his online search and went to the kitchen to fill his empty stomach. PWWWP. The fridge was empty. He'd been so preoccupied with everything that had happened in the past few days that he'd forgotten to go grocery shopping. He should probably get that done today. He yawned as he closed the fridge door. One of the very few good things about his apartment building was that it was near a large supermarket. Jinwoo left home in comfortable clothes. It was a 10-minute walk. He soon arrived at the store. As he entered, he scanned the whole place. It wasn't as busy as he'd expected, though that was most likely due to the lack of sales at the time. He grabbed a basket and slowly went around the store. Jinwoo had gotten used to doing household chores, including grocery shopping, after he became the head of the family when his mother was hospitalized. There's not much worth buying today. He stared at some items on display and debated what to make for dinner. Son, how are you doing? Jinwoo turned toward the friendly voice. Who could that be? He detected a hunter in the vicinity thanks to his high perception stat, but he hadn't paid any attention to it because lots of people, including hunters, shopped there. He didn't expect said hunter to talk to him. Moreover, he didn't expect said hunter to know him. Mr. Song? Jinwoo was delighted to see him. Mr. Song, Chiyul Song, looked at Jinwoo, half surprised and half welcoming. I heard a rumor that you were fine, but I still can't believe I'm looking at you right now. Chiyul seemed thrilled to see him, too. The way he looked at Jinwoo made him feel bashful, and Jinwoo rubbed the back of his neck. I should have visited you earlier, but those jerks from the association wouldn't say a word, so I had no idea what was going on. No idea what they were thinking. Did you know Miss Juhi is dying to hear from you too? She is? Yes, she came on a raid last week hoping to see you, even though she said she planned to quit being a hunter. Last week, according to Chiyul, the raid organized by the association had happened the same day Jinwoo joined Dong-suk's squad. No wonder there hasn't been a peep from the association in the past few days. It wasn't that they hadn't called, he just hadn't been there to receive it. In that instant, one of his questions was finally answered. Chiyul continued staring at Jinwoo incredulously. Has Sung always been this tall? Especially now, after losing that leg. His eyes moved down, and then they grew large. Your leg! Jinwoo remained composed. My leg was fine when I woke up. I'm not sure how that happened. Chiyul nodded in understanding. Since the first gate had appeared a decade ago, many inexplicable things had happened. The awakened beings known as hunters were one of them. It was said that an S-rank healer could restore a patient with a shattered body as long as they were still breathing. Perhaps a high-rank healer had treated Jinwoo while he was unconscious? If so, reattaching Jinwoo's severed leg didn't seem so impossible. A young man like you shouldn't be disabled. I'm glad. I'm really glad. Chiyul seemed as relieved as if it were his own leg. That's when Jinwoo noticed something about Chiyul's left arm. The end of his shirt sleeve was flopping around as if empty. Chiyul laughed as he touched his left shoulder. Don't worry about me. Injuries happen to hunters during raids. I was lucky enough that I hadn't had one until now. He spoke as if it wasn't a big deal, but other people clearly didn't see it that way. Oh no, look! I feel so bad for him. It was probably a magic beast, right? Middle-aged women and students whispered to one another as they passed by and spotted Chiyul's empty sleeve. A middle-aged man even stared directly at Chiyul, as if studying something fascinating. Should we go somewhere else? Asked Jinwoo. There were too many people in the meat section. Chiyul nodded, as he was uncomfortable with the way people were staring. He still had more to say to Jinwoo. That sounds good. They walked toward a less crowded area. Chiyul felt something was off as they walked. Sung's footsteps sound. Jinwoo's footsteps seemed too light. Chiyul walked right beside Jinwoo, but it was hard to feel his presence. Why was that? It was strange, but he felt like he wouldn't even be able to lay a finger on Jinwoo if they fought each other right now, even though he was C rank and Jinwoo was E rank. What am I thinking? Chiyul shook his head. That wasn't important. He wanted to tell Jinwoo something. No, he needed to tell him something. Chiyul stopped in a quiet spot. Jinwoo stopped as well. Chiyul turned toward Jinwoo and, before Jinwoo could stop him, bowed in gratitude. Thank you so much, Sung. It was sobering to see a man around his father's age bow to him in that manner. Even though Jinwoo tried to get him to lift his head, Chiyul continued talking with his head downcast. 11 people died because of me, but at least 6 survived thanks to you. I bear the biggest responsibility for that day, so I'm thanking you on behalf of everyone. Each word Chiyul spoke was genuine. Jinwoo could feel the sincerity of his sentiments. He also felt a little awkward, but he didn't mind that. He sort of felt proud. But Jinwoo couldn't allow an elder to stand before him like this for long. Mr. Song, it's okay. Please raise your head. As Jinwoo moved to raise Chiyul's head, the phone in Chiyul's jacket rang. He excused himself and took his phone out of an inside pocket. Hello? His face became serious as he listened to the other party. I understand. I'll be right there. With that, he ended the call. It looks like I have to go now. He made it sound like a personal matter, but Jinwoo had heard the contents of the conversation due to his keen hearing being boosted by his perception stat. The call had been from the Hunters Association asking for Chiyul's help with a nearby gate that needed attention. Chiyul kept this to himself so Jinwoo wouldn't follow him. He didn't want Jinwoo getting hurt again, since he'd been discharged from the hospital only recently. Jinwoo asked him directly, Was that the association? Chiyul hesitated before answering. Did you hear everything? The association summons all the hunters nearby when they host a raid. If Chiyul had gotten the call, they must have called Jinwoo's house as well. Jinwoo had been waiting for this call to battle. I'm coming too. You? Chiyul started to see Jinwoo in a different light.